Good afternoon, Chicagoland, and welcome to another edition of the Green Radio Network. Here on the Green Radio Network, we'll bring you a variety of green topics and the latest information on green technology and transportation. This program features environmental leaders throughout northern Indiana and the entire nation. The Green Radio Network is sponsored by NERPC, the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission, and the award-winning South Shore Clean Cities. Both entities are leaders in the environmental industry and work together to bring cleaner air and more sustainable living to northern Indiana. Now to introduce Carl Lissick, Executive Director of South Shore Clean Cities and the host of the show.
And today our guest is Marc from the Midwest Wind and Solar. Marc, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Carl, and thanks for having us, Mike.
It's our honor, and I'm just so excited about all the great things that are going on here in the Midwest. And I want to talk really about what Midwest Wind and Solar is. So tell our listeners, Marc, what you and Kevin really do here in the Midwest with Midwest Wind and Solar.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. We really appreciate the opportunity. It's good to be here. By the way, a fantastic location here for all the listeners. Midwest Wind and Solar, we've been in business for about 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And as the name says it all, we do wind, we do solar electric, and solar hot water. And basically offering turnkey solutions throughout the Midwest. We service the states of Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan, our home state of Indiana. When I say turnkey solutions, basically, in layman's terms, we upfront provide an assessment, basically educating people about the different options. Ultimately, if there's a path forward, help sometimes people with financing, install it with our certified crew, and afterwards help out with the monitoring and any type of servicing that may be needed with solar and wind solutions.
Very nice, very nice. Marc, I know our listeners noticed there's a little bit of an accent. Can you tell our listeners where you're from?
Yeah, happy to, Carl. I was born and raised in the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. Came over to the U.S. In the early 90s for school, and was fortunate enough to land a job with a large American company that ultimately got me actually into the solar space.
Wonderful.
About 8 years ago.
Wonderful. And so, again, as we talk about solar, what are the advantages of people? Again, I think a lot of times listeners will notice that solar is just for large companies. There's no advantages of me as an individual homeowner or as a small business owner to really go into a solar application. Let's talk a little bit about that, Marc.
Yeah, I know it's a great question, Carl, because there's a lot of conventional wisdoms such as, we're in the Midwest, there's not enough sunlight here. And a great piece of data is actually comparing it with Germany. Germany was the powerhouse in solar and basically had the largest deployment of solar in the world. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, Germany has less solar sunlight compared to here in the Midwest.
That's amazing,
isn't it? And really, what that means is that we have plenty of a resource in terms of the sun to make it worth our while. Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, solar is not for everybody. Typically, when we start an early conversation with a customer, whether that's a business owner, a school corporation, or a residential, we start to look at really the facility, the property. Sometimes people call us and say, we're thinking about a wind system. It turns out that there's too many trees to have a productive resource.
Sure.
Sometimes we talk to a house owner and it's very much shaded because of either trees or other buildings. And then we start having a conversation not so much about solar or wind. We start having a conversation about energy efficiency to reduce the electricity bill. So that's kind of how we start in the early stages and really determine by individual or by company what is right for them.
Sure. And I know a lot of the work that you do comes on referrals, comes on opportunities that people really you're helping educate the Midwest, let's say, on wind and solar. And so if someone wanted to get a hold of Midwest Wind and Solar, how would they do that, Marc?
There's a variety of ways. I would say that most of the times people simply call us or reach us via email or via our website. Our website is midwestwindandsolar.com. You can also look us up on Facebook. We try to stay pretty current with recent projects so people can get a concrete examples of what we've been up to in terms of installations and helping out customers.
Sure. And in regards to someone that would potentially like to talk to you, once you do some estimates and things like that, usually your estimates you are free of charge, correct?
Correct, yeah. The way that we work, Carl, is we really think that an educated customer is the best customer, short and longer term, quite frankly. Like you said, we get a lot of referrals, and the only way to get referrals is by people really seeing down the road that their investment was right for them. And for us, there's no such thing as a hard sell process. So yeah, we think that we need to offer a lot of upfront education, data via a free site assessment. We offer a free preliminary proposal. It's a large document with a lot of data that basically is out there to inform customers to make a decision that makes sense.
Sure. And again, we've had the pleasure of working with Mark and Kevin and your whole team on a variety of different projects. And let's talk a little bit about that. I know one of the projects that we had worked on together was the Tri-Creek Schools in Lowell, Indiana. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal and actually a heartwarming story. Really, because heartwarming, it was initiated by students. The students actually about 4 years ago came up with a project, presented it to the Tri-Creek School Board, and really the center point of their message was there's a lot that we as a school corporation can do with renewable energy, focused on education, on carbon footprint reduction, as well as utility bill reduction.
Sure.
The board really embraced that message, and under Dr. Howe's leadership, adopted a plan to see what the options are. One of the things that came out of that is in the fall of last year, they installed a 90-panel array at the middle school with the focus of reducing the electricity bill at the transportation center, but really also of getting the students involved from an educational point of view. That set the stage for thinking somewhat bolder and getting your organization involved. I think that South Shore did a phenomenal job in terms of trying to identify the right grants that are out there to support a larger array. And very fortunate enough to land a grant, and that translated into a extension of the array. And we're basically finishing up now, Carl, on the extension, which is almost 3 times larger compared to the initial array that went in. Ultimately, that's going to reduce the cost of the transportation center utility bill by about 80%.
Wow, and that's fantastic. And I know a lot of other school corporations, a lot of other businesses would be interested in this project. And I know that Tri-Creek School Corporation and Dr. Howe and Dr. Howe's staff is very proud of this, of their students and the staff. And it just seems like you're going to be hearing a lot more about activities that are going on at the Tri-Creek School Corporation. So again, thank you for all the work that your team has done on this, because it's really exciting. And again, I think you'll be hearing some updates, listeners, on this project and some upcoming opportunities with Tri-Creek School Corporation. So we talked a little bit about how we got involved with you, and I know about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, we started working with the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission and the Solarize Northwest Indiana. So talk a little bit about that, how that has really kind of led the way for communities to get involved, businesses potentially to get involved in our area.
Yeah, no, it's tremendous program that actually has been very successful throughout the country. It's a initiative that's been sponsored by the Department of Energy, the Sunshot Initiative, really with the goal of getting solar more into the local communities. There's been throughout the United States, solar deployment has done very well in terms of commercial applications, but in some areas for communities and residential applications, it struggled. The whole idea of the Solarize campaign is to educate and bring awareness to the local communities for residents in terms of what solar can do for people, and B, also by bringing some scale to the initiative, bringing costs down.
Right.
And I think that the campaign that we ran last year, which ran in the 4 communities of Gary, Hobart, Dyer, and Valparaiso, I think hit a lot of those targets. We were able to do a lot of workshops. So really bringing some education in terms of the conventional wisdoms, what can solar really do for people. I think the end game here is that, we had a nice set of installations and people that adopted solar. But even to this day, Carl, we still see people calling us because of the campaign last year. There's some very specific opportunities in addition to residential applications with the town of Dyer, the town hall. We are talking still with Hobart, with a fire station that they're putting in. So there's different applications where Solarize, I think, still is paying the dividends.
Wonderful. And that's great news. And again, across the country, maybe you can talk a little bit about the industry as a whole, because I think we're hearing a lot more implementation of solar across the entire country. And I think, as a business owner, as a homeowner, I look at some of the opportunities that are currently available as tax incentives, and maybe
Correct.
You could touch a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, great point, Carl. There's some very compelling tax incentives available for residents and businesses. Let's start with the big one at the federal level. There's a 30% tax credit.
Okay.
I always tell people at an early stage that 80% of our residential customers invest somewhere between $15,000 and $25,000. So that's obviously a big investment, and the 30% tax credit makes a big difference. I mean, let's go in the middle, $20,000, people get $6,000 back from the IRS.
Sure.
In terms of businesses, there's also a accelerated depreciation tax benefit that businesses can take. So that's an additional incentive that really helps the solar game altogether. And I think that's your bigger point here, Carl. That's why the solar industry in the United States has been growing exponentially over the last 5 years. In fact, over the last 3 years, the size of installations has doubled in across the nation.
You're listening to the Green Radio Network on AM 1420 WIMS Radio. I'm your host, Carl Lissick, and we'll be right back with Midwest Wind and Solar right after this.
There's nothing more important than spending time outdoors with your family. That's why it's so important to do whatever you can to keep our air clean. It's good for the environment and good for the health of your friends and family. Take a closer look at how poor quality is affecting our community. Across the 3 counties of Northwest Indiana, recent studies from the American Lung Association show that 9% of adults suffer from asthma, 4% live with chronic bronchitis, 38% have a form of cardiovascular disease, and 10% of the children in Lake and LaPorte counties struggle with pediatric asthma. Now, the number of adults with asthma is nearly that of adults with diabetes. Consider how diabetics make adjustments to their diet in order to be as healthy as possible. Everyone can make adjustments to improve air quality and the quality of life for those who live with asthma and other lung diseases. Northwest Indiana, clean air, think green, breathe easy. A message from NERPC.
Welcome back to the Green Radio Network here on AM 1420 WIMS Radio. I'm Carl of South Shore Clean Cities, here to bring you the latest information on green projects and topics across the nation. Our guest today is Midwest Wind and Solar, and we're talking about all the great opportunities, not only for you and wind and solar, but just some of the tax incentives that are going on. And Mark, we just were talking about some of those tax incentives, and some of the other things that we'd like to talk about is what are some of the advantages of businesses and schools and homeowners, on lowering their costs by switching to solar. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, it's a very important question in terms of people trying to understand what's really the main benefit. And quite frankly, where 10, 15 years ago, when solar was very small, most of the people, and quite really expensive, that is, people really came in from an environmental point of view. Today, that is still an important dimension, both for residential customers as well as non-residential. Basically looking at from a sustainability legacy for the future generation. In addition, though, the big angle here is really utility bill reduction, and particularly when you talk with a segment like schools. Schools, as we all know, are under a tremendous amount of pressure from a budget point of view.
Right.
Every year the budget coming under pressure, and solar is a concrete opportunity to take some of that cost out of the equation. So what we do is, like you said earlier, we look at basically, what type of site do we have? Do a free site assessment? Is there enough property around the school where we can maybe stay on the grounds with an array, or do we need to go on the roof? All those options are available. Fortunately, most of the schools here in the Midwest have flat roofs, so it's quite easy to be on roofs. And basically, that's free space that we can now deploy to realize savings for the school.
It's wonderful. And so if you're going to make some predictions, let's just make some predictions in regards to what do you see the future market for solar in maybe the next 5 years?
Yeah, it's quite frankly quite exciting.
Yes.
Number one, back in December, there was some good news that the tax credits that we talked about earlier,
right,
they're now extended. So they were going to run out by the end of the year, the 30%. It's extended by another 3 years.
Wonderful.
On top of it. Then it's actually after that 3 years going to still be in place at a reduced rate, so it's not going to be phased out immediately. So that benefit will be there. Secondly, the technology continues to evolve very rapidly. Yes. And when I say that the center point of that is that we're basically getting more out of these panels. So where 3 years ago a panel would deliver maybe 240 watts, we're now talking 270 watts.
Sure.
So the output of these panels, and therefore the cost of the technology, keeps coming down. So those are some big growth drivers that continue to drive this industry in a very big way.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about maintenance of solar. I think that's always a question that comes up from homeowners and businesses and schools that we work with. They're always, what's the maintenance associated with this, and potentially, some of the return on investment numbers.
Yeah. Two very important decision-making factors for customers. And on the maintenance side, this is again why solar is winning the battle right now compared to wind energy. With wind energy, there are some mechanics involved, and there's at least annual maintenance involved. With solar, however, that is not the case. In fact, solar does not, from a technology point of view, require any maintenance. We also say, sometimes people are like, well, here in the Midwest, we need to take the snow off the panels,
sure,
etc. We only recommend it in an off-grid situation when people really rely on the panels. The times of the year where there's snow on the panels, it is really the time where you're not going to be producing that much energy off the array to begin with. Secondly, the panels are tilted at an angle that it will slide off pretty quickly. So no, there's no maintenance. Snow will slide off. And in terms of your question about return on investment, it varies a little bit by customer. Most of our residential customers see a payback somewhere between 8 and 12 years, whereas our commercial, non-residential customers see better payback, somewhere between as little as 5 years up to about 7 years.
Wonderful. And again, as you said, I think there's every day the solar industry, the technology is improving. And again, I think that's the exciting thing. We're seeing new jobs created, green jobs. Climate change is, I think, a daily word that we hear about in radio and in media. And again, I think that's important for the future of not only Indiana, but the United States. And thank you for all the great work that you guys are doing. So Mark, as we talk about this, so what are some of the biggest barriers that we need to overcome for communities, schools, and businesses switching to solar?
I think it truly is awareness and knowledge, and for that matter, overcoming myths that come with this.
Right.
This is no longer call it a tree hugging type of affair.
Sure.
This truly makes great economic sense, and probably the best example to that, Carl, is that the solar industry over the last 2 to 3 years has seen a tremendous influx of all kinds of financing and investors coming into this array because it just makes sense from a financial point of view. And that helps also with schools, because schools are non-taxing entities. Financing companies are looking to monetize the 30% tax credit that we talked about earlier. So, I think that's probably the one of the key signals that solar is just the right play, because the economics are there. I think that the industry is overcoming a lot of those conventional wisdoms, and really our job, and that's why it's so important that we have these partnerships in place with organizations like South Shore, because it really is about educating, and it's overcoming some of these wisdoms.
Sure. So again, as you work throughout the Midwest, are there any things that potentially we should be looking at in Indiana? Again, we're working with our local legislators to look at opportunities to become more sustainable. We talk a lot about the economics. We talk about the quality of life in our area, and as we see a switch in a lot of our industry, with steel mills and the different things, and we're starting to see more of a green market come to fruition. And so what are some of the recommendations or some of the things that you think that we as Indiana residents and we should be really asking our legislators to look at, in regards to moving towards more sustainable solar types of applications?
Yeah. I think that one of the backbone supporters for solar in the country, quite frankly, is a concept called net metering.
Okay.
And net metering is something that the utilities like NIPSCO here in our area are using as a way to help people work with solar. In very simple terms, net metering means that when you overproduce with your solar array, you get credit from NIPSCO. The days that you do not produce enough for what you consume, you tap into that credit.
Sure.
That back and forth is called net metering. Throughout the country, and for that matter here in Indiana, last year, there's been some legislative efforts to put some pressure on the concept of net metering, making it less attractive for people to utilize net metering. And I think it's really important that we continue with the current net metering as in place, and when it comes to the legislative process, making sure that really continues to be the backbone that solar can utilize.
Sure. Any projects that you'd like to highlight besides, Tri-Creek Schools that you've been working on that potentially, a lot of times people don't even know that these opportunities or these projects are even going on in their neck of the woods, if you will?
Yeah, no, great question. And actually, a bit of a shout out to our local utility, NIPSCO. In one of the examples I want to highlight, we did an installation with BD Machinery in Hammond. It is a 200 kW, about 900 panels on their factory. And the shout out to NIPSCO is because they have a feed-in tariff program that BD Machinery applied for. It went to a lottery, and they got their application accepted. Feed-in tariff means that for 15 years you get a guaranteed rate from NIPSCO in terms of what you produce on your renewable energy system. So it's a guaranteed rate. Everything that you produce, NIPSCO will buy, and you get a monthly check. This is a system that in various parts of the world has been very successful. It's been one of the things that in Germany worked well. After the Fukushima earthquake in Japan, embraced feed-in tariff. Here in the US, it's not that common. So therefore, really kudos to NIPSCO and some of the advocacy groups here in the area really getting feed-in tariff on the radar. And we were very fortunate. One of our customers won that lottery, and it's been a terrific project. It's been energized since the beginning of the year, and with the sun shining today, I think that the people in Hammond are happy.
Yeah, wonderful. Any closing thoughts?
I would say that closing, again, it comes down, as you quite often say, Carl, to partnerships. Working together to get the word out, what can be done in terms of solutions for renewable energy, for people basically to be empowered to take more control over their carbon footprint, their utility bills, and the generations to come. So I think that really getting the word out, information, having informed people out there about options, and the only way to do is not to go in a singular approach, but really via partnerships.
Wonderful. Please give us your website again.
www.midwestwindandsolar.com.
As you talked a little bit about the partnerships, I can honestly say that working with your company has been a pleasure. I think that you go above and beyond customer service. I think, everyone that we've worked with that has worked with your company has been delighted to work with you and Kevin and the rest of your team. It's really been, a pleasure because we've learned a lot working with you. We look forward to a great future, and any questions that you might have in regards to solar, you can go to the Clean Cities website. We'll refer you to Midwestern Solar. There's just a lot of opportunities, and the outcome will be a better Indiana. So, again, for you and your team, Mark, thank you very much for all the great things that you're doing for our state.
Likewise, Carl, terrific work together and wonderful leadership by you and by South Shore Clean Cities.
Well, thank you. And that will do it for today's edition of the Green Radio Network. I'm your host, Carl, and thanks again to our guests, Mark from Midwest Wind and Solar, and be sure to join us again on WIMS Radio and Girard Media for the next edition of the Green Radio Network. And visit us online at SouthShoreCleanCities.org.